Better turn on the mic. That was my problem. I apologize, everybody. Well, welcome back to another listening party. This is going to be fun this time. We have a special guest with us. This is Evergreen from Fogweaver. And if you've never heard Fogweaver before, well, you're going to have a little treat tonight because that is the entire soundtrack of this episode. Evergreen, I can't thank you enough for letting us have the chance to play your music in the background of the episode. I think it was a great fit. And so, yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
You bet, you bet. So, let's see here. Well, here behind Evergreen, you can see the page. This is the Bandcamp page, and we'll actually go back to it here, later on. But you can see the beautiful art. Just that it was when we first saw Fogweaver. And I'm going to just say this quick before we get into the show, but we saw you open up for Mortis, and that was a phenomenal show. It saw the dueling wizards battle up on stage, the masks, the mirrors, and I want to ask you more details about that, which we'll do after this. But it was just awesome. It was a heck of a journey. I just really enjoyed it. It felt like a perfect fit, right, with all the other dungeon synth that was going on, and just that whole one stage act up on stage. So I loved it. But yeah, you can see some of the artwork here, and actually it's Spellwind is the one that we used primarily for this episode. So
Okay.
right. Great album. Okay, let's go. And I just, God, I love that art. I can't say it enough. That's just so cool. I'm a fan of when you put rings around the light source. I'm a sucker for that. That's like,
Yeah, yeah, me too.
it just
Yeah.
draws you in. Yeah, love it. Cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and hop over. I'm going to give a quick recap of things that had happened. So, at the beginning of this season, as we had discussed, that actually was the first game that we had ever played together. It was just a birthday game, and then we circled back to it by doing a whole prelude and all that for the full journey of the story. That was the first episode, and they went off to go to the Baron's place, right? To the manor in Darkovnia. And the Baron had a party going on, and of course Zane and Sophie were up there spying on Keldor and Shay Silverbrand as they walked through the garden, discussing their lives and where they had landed as now more older people, just showing each other some respect. As Zane and Sophie had shared that kiss under the moon, right? And we showed that picture last time. Of course the trek down the stairs, as we see here on the map. This was the long journey into the underworld, and as we had talked about, the game itself was actually we were chewing up pieces. There's no other way to put it. I was using pieces and parts of the Out of the Abyss module, just for kicks, seeing what was cool in 5e, being an old school gamer, all that stuff, right? So that's all right. But I changed it all to where it wasn't just your Underdark. It's actually a tangible underworld, the twilight between realms, and what have you. So then we have the town, right? And of course, the stranger. Some of us will remember the voice of the stranger is Phil Usher from the Aetheron Dark Saga podcast out of England. And then the Poisoners of the Skull show up. And that's when they then end up here in the prison. And all this map is put together by Vix the Chaotic, right? And this is how he told the tale, learned what was happening. So, Yes, Corey, yes. All right. So, let's go ahead and get to the story. I'll go ahead and mute up again, and we will listen to Season 2, Episode 4, Chains of Darkness. Dawn of Dragons, Season 2, Episode 4, The Chains of Darkness. Benedict groaned, rolling from his right side to the left, no longer facing the rough and jagged edge of the wall. The wall was smooth like glass, and in parts dangerously so. Scottmere was disturbed how foreign it felt to him, remarking,
"It's almost unholy. It's not like any stone I've ever seen."
It was opaque, and when light would grace itself in the 20-foot chamber of the cell, it showed blue and gray streaks, from some ancient flame, no doubt. Benedict noted it was like a smelter's slag, the runoff from smelting raw iron ore. He opened his right eye. Even that motion sent waves of pain in his overworked back and legs. For days they had been loading carts with various crates of supplies. The dark soldiers always watching their work and driving them to perform at a pace slightly faster than possible, with a load slightly heavier. Benedict tried to resist and found it was easier to just submit to their wishes and load the carts. Sophie and himself being the strongest and tallest, they were the ones driven the hardest. Scottmere was kicked around cruelly by their pointed black boots. He didn't seem to care, though. At least, he wouldn't show them. He never changed his pace. You saw Vix sitting staring at the floor with his hands clasped in his lap. His head hung low. Though they were all quiet the past few days, none was more reclusive than Vix. The Deep Elves had Vix and Cordelia gathering various local flora for their supplies. Cordelia's hands looked blackened the first day and began to blister the next, with some reaction to a local plant. She had ripped fabric from the base of her dirty white dress and made some hand wraps for herself. She never let the pain show on her face.
"We need to get out. Oh, there must be a way."
A smile tried to crack his chapped lips. His cousin was tough, for sure.
"Hey, Cordelia, are you up?"
Yeah. I wish I wasn't, but yeah.
He sat up on the glassy floor. She sat on the long rock bench along their side of the wall. Sophie sat next to her, with unfocused eyes staring at the ground. Jade as well was ever quiet, just sitting there in thought. On the floor, spread eagle lying on his back, was Scottmere.
"Nothing bothers that guy."
Sophie blurted,
I feel so stupid. This wouldn't have happened if I hadn't... Ugh, it's all my fault.
Wait, Sophie, I didn't mean...
No, you did. And you were right. I shouldn't have trusted that man.
We all had a choice,
Vix raised his head.
didn't we, Squire?
Benedict hesitated.
I'm not a squire. Not yet, anyways.
Vix chuckled.
Great. Not much else for us to do now. We're all doomed.
Don't say that. You don't know anything.
Oh, but I do. I do, little mage.
Vix's eyes grew cold as he continued.
These are the forgotten ones. Those of my people that were banished long ago, doomed to lurk beneath the earth further than our cellars or graves.
He looked back to the doorway.
They were the skull's poisoners. The god the young knight-to-be knows as the ferryman.
He sneered as much to himself as to his companions, leaning back towards them.
I tell you, we now walk with death close behind.
Sophie stood up.
Stop. I see you quake as you talk of such things, as if you know them. But I am not stupid, Vix. I will not be fooled by your facade.
She stood in the center of the floor, glaring at him, her eyes ablaze with her blonde hair falling in several dirty matted locks laying across her shoulders. Vix was visibly shaken. If one was astute enough, or had the tools, they could see the granite-like ego split, as if a great sledge had struck it.
You are scared.
He stood enraged. He shrieked with hands outstretched as he leapt for her. She used the attack's momentum to put him firmly but helplessly on the ground with a grunt.
Please stop. We need all of us to get out of this.
She stood up and glanced back at a wide-eyed Benedict and Cordelia. A very awake Scottmere was standing now.
That's right, Sophie. Together.
He strode over to Vix, who lay defeated and broken on the ground.
Come on, Vix. Gather yourself.
He helped him sit up.
Regardless of who they are in this godforsaken place, we need to get out, and we gotta be together in it.
A shock came across everyone's face as they looked at each other, frozen like statues rooted in place.
Who the...
It came from the doorway. Silhouetted against the light from outside the cell's bars was a familiar face, one they hadn't seen in days.
How did you...
I was told by an old man in the town to come find you here. Zane and I made our way in and separated after.
Zane? Is he...
He's fine. He's fine.
Sophie took a deep breath.
Stand back. I'll see if I can get it open.
What are you doing? We can't just leave.
Benedict charged at him.
So help me. I will do what I must to make sure you stay quiet.
But it was already too late.
Everyone down, they're coming.
Everyone scrambled to a normal position in their cell while Zoran panicked, looking around. Behind him was the walkway up the cliff face to the cell's location. Off the walkway was a sheer drop. Oh boy. Sophie noted minutes seemed like hours as they heard the approach of the deep elven guard. She sighed. It was worse when she saw who accompanied them. She stood slightly shorter than the rest of them, but it mattered not given the power that radiated off her and her station. Her red eyes were almond-shaped and peered into the cell as she leered at them.
And what seems to be the matter? What bothers my dear pets this morning?
They all sat silent, staring at the floor. Vic shook his head, freeing himself from the panic.
Mistress Valia.
The dark guard pointed to the edge behind her. She turned slowly like a snake coiling to strike, the blue-black velvet of her cloak cascading from her shoulders to ride at her calf. She stroked his cheek.
Move, Janek, you fool!
She shoved the man, stumbling out of the way.
Thank you, my lady.
He mumbled, bowing, while stepping back quickly, allowing her past to look down over the rocky edge into the dark abyss below. Suspended there was Zoran, dangling from the cliff face, his teeth clenched in silence. His fingers locked like iron to the edge. His arms screaming from fatigue, he clung to the edge with all he could muster. He saw her dark red lips peel back in a sneer across the ashen gray face, revealing a set of perfect ivory teeth.
Well, hello. And who might you be?
She gently stroked his knuckles with a pointed boot.
Oh no.
She shifted her weight, slowly crushing his hand. Both holding it in place and disabling him at the same time. He suddenly sneered.
I'm the prince of the world, you dumb ox.
Her eyes flared from the insult as she swung her foot to kick out his grip. Vix mumbled and gently waved the fingers of one hand. Folly's foot suddenly felt heavier than normal, throwing weight off center. She shrieked as she flung herself over the side. Vix smiled, but it vanished quickly.
How clumsy of me.
She peered over the stone edge with her arms outstretched, levitating. Gently, she floated up and out, returning to the edge, peering down at Zoran.
Seize the outsider and put him in with the others.
The guards nodded. Two of them pulled up Zoran and held him with arms behind his back. She smiled like a cat with its prey as she ran a single black fingernail across his cheek.
I so look forward to our discussion in the morning. See you soon.
She turned and strode back up the trail to the building, illuminated in darkness with the fire of blue torches. Hours passed, it seemed. But to be honest, Zoran had no idea how much time had passed. The past 2 days, he had simply slept when he was tired. Zane would be looking for him soon, he supposed. They had agreed to meet about 4 miles away at the edge of a huge underground lake before they had to sleep. Zoran was beginning to feel tired. Assigned time was running short. He walked silently to the gate and peered down both directions. All seemed quiet. He walked back to Vix.
Time to go. Are you ready?
Vix nodded. They all looked at him.
How? They took all our gear.
I have no spellbook.
Scottmere shrugged.
Or my axe?
I believe it would be foolish to retrieve them. First, we should escape. We have survived with less.
Benedict stated, putting his hand on Sophie's shoulder. Zoran smiled, nodding. Reaching into his boot, he produced a single lockpick.
I bet that smells dreadful.
Sophie smiled.
Let's get to it then.
Zoran slid the pick into the tumbler and felt the cold iron reluctantly move into place and the gate slide slowly on its rail. Zoran hissed back to everyone as a reminder as he slipped onto the pathway. Sophie sighed, thinking of her sword especially, but looked at Cordelia. She and Vix were helpless without their spellbooks except for the handful of less powerful spells they had memorized. They made their way down the path to a small guardhouse. Zoran motioned for them to stop and lower themselves to the floor a moment. He quietly approached and noticed 2 figures in the darkness playing a familiar game.
Axes. Axes again, Hondoed.
He recognized the voice of the one she called Janik.
Yes, another axe. Tell me, Janik, how do you feel about our dear mistress?
Why? She's a strong.
Yes, she's very strong.
And cruel.
Indeed. Very cruel, isn't she?
He saw the other figure lean in.
The way she treats us all. Especially the way she treats you.
I suppose.
There I lay down the skull. And let's pause a moment.
Janik sighed.
We won't always have to listen to her gloat, will we?
No. I have a feeling we won't.
The figure pointed at the table in front of him.
Look here. There's something I wish to show you.
Janik in turn looked at the table. Zoran froze. The other guard looked directly at him, with 2 icy blue eyes. The ash-colored face nodded at him.
Go.
Zoran ducked down and waved for everyone to follow him as they crept into the darkness, out of the prison they had known as an unwelcome home these past few days.
Dear Janik, do you see now?
I understand. Truly I do, but must it be?
Must it be you? Yes. As I once told someone very dear to me, all things must end sometime.
Keldor woke in his room and put on his things to walk to the breakfast hall. He could smell the sweet pastries glazed in honey and some cranberries, and the familiar favorite, cinnamon rolls. He smiled, rubbing the beard on his sleep-worn chin. He exited, shutting the door gently behind himself. Walking down the hall, he heard a small voice.
Hey!
He turned to see a halfling no taller than a young child waving at him. She carried a small lute strapped to her back that looked more like a mandolin, he thought to himself. She was dressed in dark greens and browns of the forest. Deep burgundy hair came to her shoulders. Around her neck was a small corked glass vial.
You going to breakfast?
Yes.
Me too. Can I join you?
Absolutely. But I get ahead of myself.
He knelt down on one knee and bowed to her.
I am Keldor. And who might you be, my new friend?
Larvana Birdsong.
She smiled, standing straight, taking his hands to shake it happily.
Traveling minstrel.
She nodded quickly, adding,
Well, let's get moving. Those goodies aren't going to just eat themselves.
They chuckled together as they walked down the hall, following the welcome smells and pleasant conversation. The conversation that no one seemed to notice was missing several honored guests.
Lorvana Birdsong is voiced by Cara Danvers.
The Stranger is played by Philip Usher of the Aetherin Dark Saga podcast.
This is Vix, the chaotic you sniveling fools. Voiced by Daniel Nichols of the Happy-Go-Lucky podcast.
Janik is played by Stephen Ferrugia.
Mistress Valia is played by Bridget Ferrugia.
Zoran, played by Cody Miller.
Sophie, played by Sarah Jenkins.
Cordelia Shieldheart is played by Jolene Frescus.
Gottmir is played by Colton Jansen.
Benedict Shieldheart, played by Brian Dowling.
And I am Mike Atchley, your narrator. The music in this episode was performed by Fogweaver from their album Spellwind. You can find them on Bandcamp. This episode was made possible by listeners like you and Brave Adventures Paper Miniatures. Please support our magnificent cast, music, and supporters by following their links in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode. What else awaits them in this grim underworld, and how they plan to escape. Stay safe, and remember the oath.
All right. So there it is. Episode 4, The Chains of Darkness. So, let's see. That just kind of walking down through some of the stuff that happened at the table. Some of the stuff that we were laughing at over here. Some of the stuff that you all made me laugh at. You know, it's hard to keep character with you all making me laugh. So, anyways. Let's see here. So the first one I got on here was the card game itself again appears. So it appeared in season 1. Just that made up card game that we had kind of at the table. I was throwing out different pieces and parts and what have you. But the skull and the axes, the key to that, I think the key takeaway was when that voice, and it's the voice of the stranger again, who's talking to Janik, and he calls out, he mentions the fact that he draws a skull. So that's a key piece there. Also in here, Vix seeming so tired and upset. At the table, this was when Phil, who was playing Vix, it was everybody's in the prison, and all of a sudden Vix popped in with a comment. It is like he was after he's after Benedict. That's right. And so Benedict was talking to Zoran, and then he started blowing, "What are you doing?" You know,
and like yelling.
And we're like,
I think he made a comment about how he's like, I'm gonna try and cast something, and we were like, no,
you can't.
What? Stop.
You can't in here. You know,
you're gonna make noise if you do that.
Yeah. So, anyways, it wasn't very subtle. No. Everybody comes down. We had the infamous moment with Mistress Valia and Zoran over the cliff face when he failed his stealth check.
Yeah, I think that was like the start of Cody's bad luck with his dice that then ran the entirety of this part of the campaign.
I think that's right.
Like it was I think that was the roll that started it, and then until like the end of this season, all of his rolls were
he kept buying dice.
Bad. Oh yeah, he kept buying new sets of dice.
I remember that. He kept buying new dice. He showed up. He's like, I bought these ones because they're Broncos colors. I'm like, whatever.
He rolled them and then like twos.
Twos.
He got a few ones.
He moves that, and then he went. Then he bought the big grab bag.
Oh yeah, just a bunch of dice.
That's right. He bought like a 10-pack or something like that. Came in, and he kept like retiring dice. It's
yeah, we'd like use it once and get a new one.
Roll it and move it over there.
And every time, it was insane how poorly he was rolling. We all felt really bad at one point because it was getting to the point where like Zoran would be there just like either standing around or like hurting one of us during fights.
Absolutely. And yes, the character isn't going to be doing too well. No, yeah. Spoiler: Zoran Zoran is definitely comic relief for
a little bit of time.
A little bit here. It's, and we have had some laughs.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly, Corey. I don't know what he was thinking. I wondered if he thought because they had a good defense that year that was going to help, but yeah, it didn't. So, yeah, too funny. So let's see. The when Vix is talking about the poisoners of the skull, the betrayed, the lost, that kind of thing, and it's very similar to the normal lore about the Drow, how they were driven underground, but in our world, of course, that was in the origin story, tied with the dragons, right? And so when the dragons all split into their different groups, and there was the green dragons and the Drow teamed up, and they were poisoners. They were big on that, from what I remember. That's probably the easiest way to put it right now. That was their thing. Got them in trouble, and there's the separation of them. The green dragons from the silver dragons, if I remember right. I think that's what we did. Scottmere is so... Would you say they were dragging them along? Yes, they were dragging them along into the darkness, into the deep. That's awesome. Scottmere, so awkward, right?
11.
And Colton really catches this role good.
He does.
In this season, there was little to no coaching. We've said before, he's never really acted or anything like that. He's more of an artist, but he is the player behind Scottmere. We tried to keep the cast to the actual players as much as possible, where it made sense. And with Scottmere, he plays it so well, and it gets through the season. And the next season, he actually got some coaching. He took to it great. And this season he sounds awesome, but it is kind of this journey of the not very charismatic dwarf.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. He's got a charisma of what, 7?
It was something like ridiculous, like it was too low.
Yeah, it's just he. But we didn't want to go down the same road again. You don't want to take the easy out when it deals with charisma. They'd say, okay, well, everybody, everyone you talk to has that knee-jerk reaction of just jumping to physical attributes. They're not very pretty to look at or whatever, that kind of thing. And that's there's so many other things that can make somebody uncharismatic, and so him being very awkward and very just goofy
not
and
how
weird.
To join the conversation.
You
Just saying weird stuff at random times, and you're just like,
being
okay.
odd. It's a lot more entertaining.
Yeah,
than
exactly.
Anything else. So Zoran hit a lockpick at the table. It was not in his boot.
Nope.
And this is a PG show, and so there you go. Use your own ideas where you hit that. But I remember that coming up at the table. We're like, what? Really? Okay, well, there you go.
And it saved us, so.
It saved it, so you roll with it, right? You roll with it. So and then the other one, so recording in the office, at the end, when it's Keldor and Lorvana executing those scenes, it sounds so, it actually fit.
Yeah.
It sounded kind of distant, but I recorded this in the office at work, where it just naturally reverberated. So, kind of a fun deal. So, so that's the main pieces there. Again, that's like the opening adventure of Out of the Abyss, where you wake up in the Drow prison. There's if the DM doesn't read closely, they'll bring them all in, and sometimes it's fun. That's what we kind of did with 14 NPCs that end up in there, and you got to have everybody kind of play one and have some fun. So it was cool. It was a different way of playing that mechanic, and we were just kind of trying everything out at that point, so we just kind of tied it in, and then like everything with us, we played it to the book for half a session, and then just started making up so much stuff that it's just we're over here.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter anymore. So, all right, so that's all the game stuff. Okay, so cool. Well, I wanted to talk to Evergreen instead of me just rambling, and I really appreciate you being here and all that stuff. So, first I wanted to talk about the inspiration for Fogweaver comes from Earthsea. Is that true?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Can you elaborate around that? As far as how would you describe that world, or what captures you about it?
So actually, funny enough, I was just talking to a friend today about how one of the most amazing things that like really captured me when I first opened the Earthsea books is the entire world is built around this archipelago. So instantly I was thinking, you know, there's got to be all these different cultures, all these different islands, who knows what, all kinds of critters. And so I think that alone has interested me. I've always been very fascinated by like islands and rocky coasts and stuff like that. But overall, I think that the Earthsea books just have this like really dreamy, sort of surreal atmosphere to them that just really clicks with me.
That's awesome. That's very cool. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Change the background to your page so that way we can look at this. It's so cool. So with the artwork, what was there a particular artist that you worked with, or is it different each time? It seems to have a nice flow between some of these. It looks like the same artist in some cases.
Yeah. So the most recent album and the Imminent Grove are the same artist. You can kind of see the similarities there. The rest of them are actually all different.
Oh, very
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. And I think, was it the Imminent Grove? How do you pronounce the other band? Is that Akbi? Is that right? Akbi? Did I say that right?
Yeah. You always say Arith Akbe myself.
Arith Akbe. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. No, I appreciate it. You know, I want to make sure I get it right. So, and they're another band that was big on the Earthsea worlds, right?
Yeah. That's actually how he and I got in touch. I found his project and was like, well, you know, we got to do a split. There's two Earthsea projects, so we got to do something together.
That's awesome. I love it. And so with and then you have another comp there with the Fog Castle, Fog Lord. That's the Kingdom of Fog, right? And well apt. I like that. And these are all. So you can purchase them from Bandcamp and get the downloads, correct? But
yeah.
It also seems to be like a big collector thing with putting them on cassettes. Is that the where everybody's kind of adding, like you press them to actual cassettes still?
Yeah, there's so within the world of Dungeon Synth, the genre that Fogweaver resides within, there's a huge connection to a lot of the old Dungeon Synth, like Mortis and stuff, began in the 90s, and there's a huge connection between Dungeon Synth and black metal, and black metal's always had this kind of cassette culture thing. But yeah, actually, I'm very into collecting cassettes too. So, but yeah, it's for whatever reason, definitely a big part of the culture.
That's very cool, and it keeps it. In all honesty, that I was actually talking with several people recently when we talk about vinyl, right, and how it's still a thing, that when you get that vinyl and you drop the needle, you'll record it to cassette and just play that until it wears out, and then you'll drop the needle again, right, and record another cassette. So that's still a pretty popular thing because, you know, it's analog, right? I mean,
right.
Not going to beat analog. It does have a tone that you can't beat. When you mix down to to digital, you lose a lot. And even the stuff we do, we'll end up recording in 32 floating point, that kind of a thing. You'll have it on there where it's close, and you're like, all right, well, it's time to mix it down. And when you get to ready to put it up there, all of a sudden compression happens weird, and like little nuances get lost, or somebody's voice ends up in the background, and you're like, it'd be so cool if I could press 20 records.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's cool. That's very cool. So, is there anything coming up that we should keep an eye out for? Like, you got a show coming up, or any releases coming out that you want to plug?
So far, I have mostly reissues coming up. A label called Out of Season is putting out all of my material on CD. And then there's another label called Foreign Sounds that will be eventually doing some cassette reissues and hopefully vinyl as well, actually. But as far as anything else, I'm slowly working on the next album, but don't have anything quite ready yet.
No worries. I understand. You gotta wait for the muse to show up, right? Can't force it.
Yeah. And I work on a lot of different projects. Fogweaver is just one of, 20 different music projects that I do. So,
awesome.
So I'm kind of always working on something.
Oh, that's cool. So is there, some of the other projects, is there, like what other things do you like to do? Is that, you want to talk about that a little bit, like different kinds of projects?
Yeah, so I have quite a few that are also in the dungeon synth genre on different, in different ways, and kind of to express different atmospheres. So I have one called Hideous Gomphidious, which is mostly just kind of, it actually connects back to an old Pathfinder campaign that I did with some friends, and I just got really inspired with this idea of this very fungal sort of world. So it's all supposed to be kind of like being in a cave and just being surrounded by mushrooms and lots of creepy critters and trolls and stuff about. So that's one of the other projects I do. I have one that's more like a science fiction sort of synthesizer project called Del Maco. And yeah, a lot of ambient music.
Hey,
I do a lot
cool.
of different things. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love music. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a huge music fan. So that's cool. I love seeing what everybody does in different areas, right? I mean, it's like when I first got into dungeon synth, a little late to the first wave of it, right? I saw Mortis on the Stargate tour over at the Bluebird. I think is
okay.
I saw that one. An awesome show. Just like I was like, this stuff exists. I am in, right? I just love it. And I actually met a buddy of mine there that I didn't expect to see there because he's hardcore, Black Doom, all that. And he said, well, I'm here to see Mortis. And I'm like, really? I don't even know who they are. He's like, oh, you just wait. And sure enough, I went to him afterwards. That was amazing. I don't know what just happened. But my face is somewhere against the wall. He came out, and it was him and two guys on timpani, and then had this lady who was doing the opera vocals, and then everything else was sequenced, and he was taking the the sacrifice victim and all this stuff, and I'm like, oh my god, this is awesome! And then he throws her over his shoulder and runs off like an imp into the night. And I was just in love at that point. So wow. Very cool stuff. It's amazing seeing what's happened with that kind of resurgence of the dungeon synth, right? And the fact that Mortis, not to go back to that again, but because we're not interviewing him, but we share a fandom, but that he went back to the dungeon synth sound after trying to go into more of the goth industrial, kind of stuff. It's kind of it's neat seeing it come back. So, on one question I have for you is when you sit down to write, do you write on like an analog synth, or do you do it all digital, or like can you explain kind of like your workflow a little bit?
Yeah. So that can be, though it's not necessarily, it can be a way that I actually differentiate how I go into working with a different project. So some of them like Fogweaver, actually, for instance, I pretty much explicitly work on Fogweaver I have 2 old Yamaha keyboards and an old Casio. And so I like to work with those sounds for that project just because it's more that, there's a nostalgia to Fogweaver that I really, just because the Earthsea books that I really want to capture. And I think that the old kind of cheesy keyboard sounds just work really well with that. But yeah, some of the others I'll work with like more of I have like a little digital synthesizer, and some of the things I do are just guitar or different things like that.
Oh, totally. That's cool. And kind of experiment with sound, right? Because that's that you're sculpting sound. There's all these different sounds in the world. I had a talk with some folks at one point that were also doing audio drama stuff. And they said, well, how do you do, the Foley, or how do you do these different sound effects and stuff like that? Well, sure, you can purchase the packs, but then everybody sounds the same, and you run into what I like to call the early 80s effect of action movies, where every explosion sounds like the opening of the A-Team.
Yeah.
And every gunshot sounds just like, Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando. It's just, that's the way it is. And when you do it yourself and you start you start listening to the world around you, right? The best thing that I ever purchased was the simple, recorder to carry around with me, right? I'll go on walks and just different sounds, different birds, the trees, all that kind of stuff to try and bring in, that feeling, because you're sculpting sound. And I love what you said with the Casio and Yamaha synths, the older ones, right? Where there's those, correct me if I'm wrong, but the PCM style synth where it's the digitized sounds on there. It sounds like I'm stepping back into 1988, that kind of a thing, and kind of writing something on the synth or what have you. It does have a nostalgia to it, regardless of it being new, fresh music that you're putting out. There's that it calls out to at least my soul. I know that. It's great work. I love it. It's so cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. Well, let's see here. Got that. So this point, I'm going to go ahead and start going through stuff on the end. As soon as my mouse comes back. There we go. All right, what we got upcoming here? We got, so on the 11th, it's going to be Tales from the Forge, so I'll be back doing some more leather work. Not going to do it in the garage this time. Those of you here on Twitch probably noticed that I ended up with 6 videos because I kept dropping in and out. So until I run a cable out to the actual forge, to actually stream it right, I'm going to just do it in the basement, and that's okay. You know, that I'll just run it over there. We'll hang out and jam out, and I'll show you what I'm working on there. I got some. I got 3 sets of bracers to make. I got another cuirass to make. This Saturday, of course, is the opening of the Colorado Ren Fair, and so I'll be in my barbarian gear, stomping around and doing my thing. So that's what I do. And then finally on the 13th is the next episode of this listening party with the City of the Great Forge. So definitely join us. This is where we're going to go into the actual great city of the dwarves and see what's happening there. All right. Finally, in closing, I just wanted to, thanks everybody. Of course, big thanks to Evergreen from Fogweaver. Thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing us to use your beautiful music in this episode. It really meant a lot. I'll be honest, I was, like, how do I say this? when I asked the first time. But thanks for being so cool, so welcoming. Definitely wish you the best. Anytime you want to collaborate, hit us up, by all means.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You bet. So thanks to all who supported the Season 4 Kickstarter. Again, we almost doubled the Kickstarter, and appreciate all that support. That was super cool. And to Brave Adventures for partnering up with us with the paper minis. Actually make the paper minis of the main cast. Is pretty cool. And to our patrons, JD Rose, Brian Dowling, Colin Holmes, Daniel Nichols, Haley Munoz, Jolene Fresquez, Corey Fouch, and Stormy Cohn. All right. And so on that note, I'm going to go ahead and close this out, throw on some tunage here, and everybody can have a good eve. Take care of yourself, everybody.